In this video, I'm going to show you step by step how to round a number. Let us use the same example as in the previous video, 4844. And let's round it to the nearest 100. All right. So the first thing I want to do is point to the digit whose place value is in the hundreds, and that's of course 8. Now, the next step is to look at the digit immediately to the right, which is a 4. 4 is less than 5. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to keep the 8, and anything after 8 becomes 0. And I can also keep, of course, the 4. No change here. Now let us use the same example, but this time I'm going to change the tens digit to a 6. So it's going to be the same number, 4, 8, but then instead of the 4 I'm going to have a 6, and the last digit is the same. So now again we want to round to the nearest 100. Again, the 100 digit is the 8. I look at the next digit, which is a 6. It's greater than 5, so therefore I'm going to round this up to a 9, keep the 4, and anything after the 8 becomes 0. So we just rounded 4864 to the nearest 100, and that makes sense because 4864 is closer to 4900 than to 4800. In our next example, we want to round 501 to the nearest 1000. Notice that the leftmost digit 5 is the hundreds, so there's no 1000. So what do? Well, since there's no 1000, let's replace the thousands with a 0. So in other words, we have 0,000. Again, we go through the same procedure. The next digit to the right of the 0 is a 5. So 5, remember, 5 or greater, you round the 0 up to a 1. And anything after that becomes 0. Again, that makes sense because 501 is closer to 1000 than to 0. Our next example is a little tricky. It requires a knowledge of counters, like you find in the speedometer. For instance, take this number 128,994. If the 4 becomes a 10, the 4 is going to be replaced with a 0, and then the 1 is carried over to the left. So the 9 becomes a 0, that 9 becomes a 0, and this 8 becomes a 9, and the 2 and the 1 stay the same. So we're going to use that principle to round 128,994 to the nearest 100. Now let's rewrite that same number, 128,994. The hundreds place is the 9. Now when you round to the nearest 100, you're going to look at the next digit, which is a 9. So that 9 is rounded up to a 0. And of course, the 1 is carried over to the 8. That means you add 1 to 8 and you get to 9, but the 2 stays the same. And as before, any digit after the 100 also becomes 0. So you end up with 129,000. And again, it makes sense because 128,994 is closer to 129,000 than to 128,900. So in this case, we would write that 129,000 is sandwiched between, that 128,994 is between 128,900 and 129,000. To finalize this lesson or videos on rounding, I would like to give you a few exercises to do on your own. Good luck.